also greet our mother, the founder of this important university, Mama Martha Kasanga Mulwa, and greet your husband wherever he is, that he left us a lasting legacy that we stand to celebrate here today. The leadership and academic staff, our Vice Chancellor, the Chancellor is here, and all the staff members who are here today to celebrate with us. And we also want to send our revolutionary greetings to the leadership of our province, what we call a province, I hear you call it sub-national, the governor, and all these politically elected leaders who are here today. We are really grateful for your presence. Let me also send my greetings to the Lukenya University students and members of the community, members of the media and fellow Africans. Today it feels good to be African. Right here in Kenya, a place we call our home, because all of Africa is our home. No one can ever say to me, welcome to Kenya or Lukenya or Nairobi, as if I'm a visitor. I regard no part of Africa as being foreign to me, because Africa, all of it, belongs to me and I belong to Africa. It is a humbling honor to be invited to address the launch of the prestigious Pan-African Institute, which is targeted at creating intellectual collaboration and unity amongst the people of the continent. Let us therefore begin by congratulating you on this initiative, which is long overdue in light of the importance of the continent to reclaim its intellectual and academic identity within the global community in general. We know that ideas are at the core of the African capacity to chart its own destiny within the community of the world. Intellectual sovereignty has to be forged through research and development that is steeped in African experiences, African problems, and African questions. The economics of the African Academy have been part of the modalities of the broad draining of our resources. Because of lack of dedicated funding, many thinkers in the continent are taken in the general brain drain driven by Euro-American institutions. As we have seen over the decades, there is no way Euro-American is going to fund an intellectual project that will see Africa truly become intellectually sovereign. A truly sovereign Africa is a threat to the imperialist establishment that continue to determine the agenda and control of our resources. It is also inspiring to see that our esteemed Prof. Lumumba and those who are joining him in this initiative have chosen our continent, and Kenya in particular, to establish an intellectual research and knowledge institution. Accordingly, our first duty is to call on sons and daughters of the continent, both based here and in the diaspora, to jealously fund this institute and ensure that it create and charts a unique Africa based on an original thought, because we have a duty to chart our own intellectual path. We are also inspired by the fact that the Institute concept of Pan-Africanism include all people of African descent. That is, those in the continent, the Americas, Caribbean islands, Europe, and Asia. This is because wherever they are found, people who look like you and me continue to be treated as an inferior race. When you see a black person, when you see an African person, everywhere else in the continent, in the diaspora, and all over the world, please be kind to African people, for because they are a hated nation. Wherever they are being enslaved, they are being tortured, they are being harassed. no one shows them love. But you, as an African who claim to be a Pan-Africanist, you have a responsibility to show fellow Africans love and care. The violent, genocidal, and catastrophic transatlantic slave trade and colonialism are the historical twin towers that plugged the humanity of Africans into the dark night, which to this day seem to have no end in sight. The image of the African as a black and subhuman was forged through massive and violent enslavement of millions of African people sold in the Americas as properties of white colonial settlers. In the coastal and mainland villages of West Africa, through the gun, the dogs, and the spears, African communities were plundered, captured against their will, and chained like animals. At the ports of Ghana, those chained, naked, and malnourished bodies of men, women, and children were scaled, measured, and sold for gold, silver, or livestock. They were put in those gigantic ships that crossed thousands of kilometers of the massive body of violent and cold waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Millions will not survive the dangerous voyages on sea. They will die of disease, starvation, or pure mental illness. Many will be offloaded alive, thrown into the deep waters to ease navigation during the storms of the violent seas. It is on those cold Atlantic Ocean's waters, deep in the bottom of the ocean, that many carcasses of African people, their bones lay rotten in chains and swallowed by the sea. Those who survived and on arrival in the Americas were forced to work in the different plantations of white men. From the voyage ships to the plantation, the image of an inferior African was being constructed through brutal force. Then began the violent colonial conquest for settlement aimed at our natural resources that defined our native continent. The white man sought to rule Africa and here designed a system of racial segregation, racial humiliation, racial abuse that lasted for many centuries. The colony and the plantation, with the voyage slave ships in the middle, were the perfect technologies of recreating the African into a subservient being whose only survival in the modern world must always be through white tutelage, supervision, and approval. The transatlantic slave trade, colonial conquest, and colonial rule are responsible for the zombification of the African soul and its intellectual damnification and the psychotic condition where Africa and its people cannot handle their affairs without white supervision. As both an intellectual project and a program of revolutionary change, Pan-Africanism is first the recognition of this terrible history, which by all definition remains a world history that has cast the African into a global identity of inferiority amongst people of the world. Pan-Africanism is never forgotten noise of the painful cries of those captured slaves whose black bodies were swallowed by the Atlantic Ocean from the slave ships. It is the agonizing cry from the brutal violence suffered by the black slaves in the sugar, cotton, and corn plantations from Georgia to Sao Paulo. Pan-Africanism is also the resounding victory from the theater of the Haitian Revolution from 1781 to 1804, led by the greatest descendant of our continent, Toussaint Louverture. Together with his patrons, they bravely led the first and only successful slave revolution in human history, defeating a combined European force commanded by a France Napoleon Bonaparte. It is the bravery of those African former slaves who will define citizenship on a racial definition of blackness, declaring that Haiti belongs to black people regardless of the color of their skin. Pan-Africanism is also the anger emanating from the countless defeats suffered by the patriots, the brave soldiers like those of Mau Mau and Bambata rebellion, defeated at the hands of the brutal British colonial forces. It is the intellectual heritage of Marcus Garvey, W.E. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, Harriet Tubman, Pixley Isaac Aseme, Charlotte Mateke, Winnie Mandela, Kwame Nkrumah, Seiko Tore, Julius Nyerere, Haile Selassie, CLR.A. James, Frantz Fanon, Thomas Sankara, and today our own Prof. Lumumba, together with us, must carry the mantle of the African Pan-Africanist call. Pan-Africanism is a set of ideas written in chains with blood, spear, and the unforgiving guns of the sons and daughters from the Algerian Revolution to the Battle of Kutoko-Naval. It is the one-party state of Africa as a whole, as professed by Marcus Garvey. It is Ami Caesarius' negritude, Kwame Nkrumah's African socialism, Steve Biko's black consciousness, Julius Nyerere, Ujamaa. It is also Mbeki's African Renaissance, all based on forging a unity of African people who are formed by the same history and must seek after common destiny. It is the architectural achievement from the pyramid of Egypt to the cities of Mapungubwe. It is the industrial invasion by Garrett Morgan, traffic lights, Frederick Jones, refrigerated trucks, and Alexandra Miles, automatic elevator doors. It is the cultural movement in jazz, R&B, reggae, funk, blues, kwaito, juju Nigeria, Chimorenga Zimbabwe, Makosa Cameroon, and Benga Kenya. It is the novel Things Fall Apart, The Devil on the Cross, Maru, The Trails of Brother Jeru, Songs of Solomon, and Notes of Native Son. It is the artwork of Gerald Sekoto, Chike Anyako, Oche Okeke, Edmonia Lewis, the religious movement of Bishop Lekhanyane, Manku, and Shembe, the Coptics of Egypt and the Ethiopian Orthodox Christians, as well as Islamic denominations from Tunisia, Nigeria, Kenya, all deserve a place in the rich thinking and knowledge about Africa and its people. It is true that Pan-African call has also been prophetic, carrying important cautions that those who conducted the project for the rebirth of the African continent in the post-colonial context have not heeded to. In the pages of Frantz Fanon, Ratchet of the Earth, lays a critique which, since independent in the 1950s to this day, leaders of African people have failed to give programmatic response to this call. First and foremost, the Pan-African call is a call for African unity, not cooperation, collaboration, or coexistence. Many of you confuse the unity of Africa to mean collaboration or cooperation. We don't want to cooperate, we don't want to collaborate, we want to be one, and being one means we must share the same vision and the same direction. Yet many over the past half a century have chosen cooperation which has given way to neo-colonialism. That is to say, for African leaders to continue colonialism without direct rule by colonialists. The launch of the Pan-African Institute right here in Kenya must help us intellectually to shift towards revolutionary Pan-Africanism, contribute to resolving some of the historical mistakes, blunders committed by post-liberation movements. We should state clear here that while the formation of the Organization of African Unity was a step in the right direction, the fact that the founding conference failed to unite the African continent is a historical blunder. President Kwame Nkrumah Seko Tore and Emperor Haile Selassie prophetically said that the failure to unite the African continent will give rise to the neo-colonialism and that African continent will perish. The revolutionary Pan-Africanist ideological and political diagnosis of the future was correct. The future is here. 50 years later, we know that we remain visitors in our own continent. We know that our resources benefit Euro-American than our own people. This is despite most African countries gaining independence from colonial rule since 1957. Massive, huge tracts of land, our mineral resources, our animals, our oceans are still owned and controlled by the colonial masters. There are no countries in the entire African continent that have gained full economic emancipation and independence. And this includes Ghana, which was the first to lead the road. Till to date, it can't claim that Africans in Ghana own the means of production. In 2016 report titled The New Colonialism reveals that there are 101 British companies listed on the London Stock Exchange that control an identified 1.5 trillion US dollars worth of resources in Africa in just 5 commodities: oil, gold, diamond, coal, and platinum. This is a very conservative figure since it includes resources listed by only some companies. Many companies do not provide the figures of the resources they control. And majority of these companies that do not tell us what they control and what they own in Africa are found in DRC, because they are the ones who fuel the divisions in DRC. They are the ones who fuel the fight in DRC, and they are stealing the resources of DRC because they know there is no proper accountability for such resources. The War on Want report on neo-colonialism further illustrates that the fact that these 101 companies...
My very good friend, Dr. Rotarian Emmanuel Katongore, is a great man. He is great because he has, throughout his adult life, chosen to serve humanity. 2 weeks ago, I was at an airport in Africa at Bole in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, and an old man approached me and told me the tragedy of Africa is that we rhapsodize our men and women when they are dead and vilify them in life. Yet wisdom demands that we lionize men and women who have done good when they are alive. Today we choose to lionize you when you are alive. I've had the advantage of listening to the speakers who came before me, and I could very well say that when I listened to the passion and erudition of Dr. PK, he spoke for me. When he defined what leadership is all about, he spoke for me. And I could very well sit down, but I will not sit down. When I listened to the intelligent and at once beautiful lady, Madame Fall, from Senegal, she spoke for me. And I could very well sit down, but I will not sit down. I also had the almost apocalyptic and doomsday scenario painted by Edgar. And for those of you who are digital, you must have assumed for one moment that your life is at an end. I can assure you that there is life beyond Edgar. But there is a sense in which he defined what the world is about. I then had the advantage of listening to the panel discussion. Anil, my friend, whom we are in the business of meeting after every 12 months, spoke about what leadership is all about. And he spoke about leadership and what leadership does. I listened to Emmanuel from Zimbabwe and the many things that he has done over the years and how he has been able to identify that leadership is about service. And I did not stop there. I listened to the incoming district governor, Rossetti, explaining to us what Rotary does and how it utilizes our funds for the general good. And perhaps leadership is service. Is when you serve that you lead. And perhaps over the years, we have misunderstood what leadership is all about. Then we had the occasion of listening to Dr. Diana, whom I've had the opportunity of meeting before this day, giving personal testimonies of what defines our continent of Africa in matters as mundane as the lack of blood at critical moments. And then, of course, we had the motivation from Dr. Emmanuel Katongole and how this idea came all the way from the Deputy Prime Minister of the Kingdom of the Buganda, which gave meaning to the whole idea that when we talk about leadership, is about learning. We are here, therefore, this evening, sacrificing our time and our money that we may lead through service. Many times in the last few years, I've had the advantage of traveling to many African countries. And one sees how Africa lacks in the most basic of things. Sometimes, if one is a pessimist, one is likely to surrender and to leave it to God. But God, in his divine wisdom, also enabled us with wisdom. And that is why we are assembled here today, because in a way we are celebrating the wisdom of men and women who have chosen to dedicate their lives to make a contribution in a chosen area of service. The area of providing blood to those who are in distress. You know, when you are alive and well and healthy and hearty and imbibing wine and water and other beverages, it never occurs to you that you may need blood. I'm not being morbid, but it happens in the twinkling of an eye that you are driving home and some irresponsible individual maneuvers his car or border or any other moving object, and lo and behold, you need blood. Then it is discovered that you can't find blood. That is when you begin to appreciate that initiatives such as these are life-defining. So when we are gathered in an assembly such as this, what are the critical questions that must invade our minds and hearts? When I listened to Eja, and he spoke passionately, and he told us how technology has now dramatically changed our lives. And I can't agree with you more, Eja, that indeed it has. I remember so very vividly as a young man when we had a company called Eastman Kodak. And many of you will remember the occasions when some amateur photographer in your school wanted to immortalize your borrowed suits and dresses through a photograph. And you had to pose for your photograph to be taken. And 2 weeks later, the individual would come and say that the photograph burnt. So it was not there after all. Eastman Kodak is now out of the equation because of technology. Your mobile phone, when we talk about technology and artificial intelligence, your phone, you yourself today, is a part of artificial intelligence, because many of us, without the mobile phone, as I just said, we can't function. That is how it is. But the other truth is also, and permit me to say this, there are doctors here, Africa presents in a very schizophrenic way. Schizophrenia is a psychiatric condition of multiple personalities. There is an Africa which uses the smartphone, but there is another Africa which does not know about the smartphone. But the tragedy is that even if it does not know, it is affected by it. Ugandans are now beginning to learn Kiswahili. In Kiswahili they say, mtego wa panya huingia waliomo na wasiokuwemo. And the English rendition, if I may transliterate rather than translate, is this: that a mouse trap traps every mouse, regardless of the one that ate whatever it was. Every mosquito suffers, even if it is not the one that actually invaded you, because they suffer in the community of mosquitoes. So all of us, in a sense, are victimized by these realities. As I grow older, and I'm growing older by the day, I ask myself very fundamental questions, particularly we as Africans. In other parts of the world, the question of the availability of blood, if you are in Sweden or in Denmark or in Singapore or in Norway, perhaps it would be different. But in the African continent, the reality is that we are saddled with many things that stand in our way of solving these very mundane problems. I was gladdened when Dr. Diana said that they had an agreement with the kingdom of Busoga. It is true in very many African societies that you would be told that you cannot allow your blood to mix with anybody's blood. So you need to engage those who are in that space to persuade those over whom they have influence and authority to know that donation of blood is a good thing, and that you don't have to be rich to donate blood. You only have to be healthy, and you only have to have a heart that is giving. You only have to define what it is that you want to contribute to your society. That is why we are gathered here today. Just this morning, I was rereading a book that I had read several years before. It's a book that was written in the 5th century BC by a Chinese called Sun Tzu. And in that book he says, among other things, that deep knowledge is about being aware of disturbance before the disturbance comes. It is about being aware of danger before danger comes. It is about being aware of calamity before calamity comes. Because when you are aware of disturbance before it comes, you can convert it into peace. When you are aware of danger before it comes, you can turn it into order. And when you are aware of calamity before it comes, you can convert it into something positive. That is how I understand the initiative of Dr. Emmanuel Katongole. He is aware of the danger before it comes. He is aware of the calamity before it comes. And that is what changes society. And that is what defines what leadership is all about. You know, many of you here are either practicing Christians or practicing Hindus or practicing Muslims. And whether you read the Muslim Quran or the Christian Bible or the Hindu Gita or the Jewish Torah, those who lead their fellow men and women to greatness are initially very reluctant, but once they have made the decision, they are amazingly passionate. The Muslims who are here, and I believe they are, will remember that confrontation between the Prophet Muhammad and the angel Jibril in the caves. When he is told, read in Arabic, Ikra, and he says, I cannot read. Then he reads, and the world has never been the same again once he started reading. And the moral of that story is that when you start serving, you can never stop serving. And those of you who are Christians will remember that day when the Son of Man at the wedding in Cana is asked by the mother that the wine has run out, and he is reluctant. And then he is persuaded to convert water into wine. And from that day, wine has always been flowing. And those of you who are Hindus, I assume there are some here, in that battle of Kurukshetra, in the conversation between Arjun and Krishna, when he doubts that he should start the war, immediately he is persuaded, the war continues and truth triumphs over good. I'm persuading us.
Hey guys, welcome back once again to my YouTube channel. I'm B-Boy. Remember, if it was for the first time you're coming across my video, don't forget to like this video, subscribe and share. Okay guys, in today's clip, I hope you have listened to the speech of Julius Malema, Dr. Arikana and Patrice Lumumba. They are all the activities from Africa, and they really know how to fight for the right of African people as countries or as a continent and Caribbean. They have really come out and told these Western countries that it's really high time that African Caribbean doesn't need them. They really need us. Why are they saying this? It's because we have all seen how Africa is so very rich when in terms of mineral resources. It has everything, but a lot of people have that mentality that Africa is so poor, but in real sense, we have a lot of countries that have a lot of mineral resources in their country, whereby if they can be able to use these mineral resources in a good way, they can really make the country to develop at a very high pace. And this mentality of Africa being a poor continent, it will end, because you have all seen, look at a country like Burkina Faso, it has a lot of gold in it. Look at a country like Congo. Come to Nigeria, it is the biggest country in Africa that produces oil, crude oil. There is a lot of African countries come to Caribbean, and it's really high time these African activities that really came out and warn Western countries that it's high time they really need us, because they should just respect us, because they will be coming to us begging for raw materials, begging for anything they want, maybe for gold, for oil, and they really need us indeed. And also Caribbean, they really need us. So I would really love our African leaders to wake up. This is our wake up call, to open their eyes to see what other African leaders like our president of Burkina Faso is really doing. President Ibrahim Traore is really doing a great job to his people. He's really doing a great job to his country. We have all seen Burkina Faso, it has a lot of gold in their country. That's why the president is really using this opportunity very well. Using this opportunity to build Burkina Faso and to build the Burkinabe people. And look at a country like Nigeria. Maybe another person can come out and say that Nigeria, they are known for maybe having a large, or maybe producing a lot of crude oil, but they are still struggling when it comes to economy. There is a lot of poor people in Nigeria. They don't have good infrastructure. Yeah, maybe a country can have all these things, but when a country just has a bad leader, or has a puppet leader, or a leader who doesn't know the things or the will of his people, they will end up to be poor, because these leaders will just look to those Western countries. They will be benefiting other countries, especially Western countries, forgetting their local people. So if a country has mineral, look at a country like Congo. Yeah, Congo, it has a lot of mineral resources, but they are still struggling. Nigeria, come to a lot of African countries and some Caribbean countries. They have a lot of mineral resources. They are so rich when it's come to mineral resources and anything in this country, but they are still struggling. The reason why this country they are still struggling is because they haven't yet chosen the right, maybe let me just say, the right leader who can maybe direct or be able to manage all these resources. We all seen how President Museveni of Uganda, he came out and said that there will be no any raw material that will be transported from Uganda or maybe imported without being refined or being manufactured. And we want all leaders to be like the same, to be like Museveni, to be like President Ibrahim Traore. All the mineral resources should remain in the country, be manufactured on this our African soil, and we'll be in a better place, because you have all seen how a lot of people, they are really struggling, especially in Africa. Job opportunities, African people doesn't have. The main problem in Africa is job opportunity, that is making maybe Africa to be called poor continent on earth. But Africa, it's so rich. Africa, it has a lot of resources. Africa, it has anything that will be needed, whereby these Western countries should come to us. And I would really like and pray when it will reach a point whereby these Western countries, they are borrowing loan from African countries to be vice versa, because a lot of African countries, they are really borrowing loan from these Western countries, maybe to build their roads. A lot of Africans, they have borrowed a lot of loan, whereby when it's come to paying or to paying back this loan, it gives the local people harder time because the government increases the taxes. But I would really like to pray that it should reach a time whereby these Western countries can come to our African countries and borrow some loan, whereby we'll be equal. We just want African people to be equal, and black people, we should unite together as one and will be far much better. So guys, if it was for the first time you come across my video, don't forget to like this video, subscribe and share. Thank you so much for your time. May God bless you. One love.